vast of night.
Well, that essentially spells it out for you. Welcome to 2019's The Vast of Night. Essentially, this is our glimpse into what would have happened if aliens had reached out to us in the 50s. Spoiler alert, while I may give you my opinion here, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description, and don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 100,000 before the end of the year. As the show plays out, it shows a character going to a store in Kaguya. Later on at the high school, we find that Benny has called Everett to check out the electrical system for the high school basketball game. As he walks around waiting to see what's wrong, everyone calls out to him to ask him a question.
Everett, can I bring you my tape recorder so you can show me how it works?
I don't know what you just said, Faye. You sound like a mouse being eaten by a possum. Rennie.
So obviously, Everett is the hotshot geek that is actually kind of popular, and he's got the attitude to go with it. Who said nerds were the joke of the town back in the day? As Everett gets brought back to the electrical side of things, everyone all of a sudden decides that he isn't the one that they want. So Everett takes himself out and goes about his merry way. On his way out, he tells the recorder how to handle the machine, and then he runs into Faye, who is hoping to ask him for his advice on a matter. As he spends some time with Faye and her new recorder, we see that she's the only person around that he sees to be worth his time anymore. As they wander through the parking lot, Everett tries to give her the ins and outs of interviewing people, and he even has her try to interview some random people in the parking lot. The fact that these people are so nonchalant about answering random questions as they sit in their car eating before the game shows that Everett can literally ask anyone anything, and he can get away with it too. They don't even care. They act like this is an everyday occurrence, but it's obviously not because Everett seems to be rather antisocial unless he wants to be. After leaving the parking lot, Faye and Everett end up walking down the road while Faye tells him about some science research she read about. As she tells Everett about inventions that are set to be made in the near future, Everett walks her to her door, then he runs off to the radio station. As the video turns to an old TV monitor, we see Faye speaking with her friend Ruth, and Faye brings up some weird occurrences that were happening at the school before she left. Once Ruth leaves, it becomes clear that the two of them work at an operator house, and the two women are two of the operators on staff. Being an operator back in the day had to be some of the most boring work ever. Also, some of the juiciest. You either find out everyone's business because they ask to be connected to certain people, or you literally sit there and wait for someone else to use the phone. You can't even upsell the job. It just is what it is. As Faye waits for someone to call, she turns on the radio and dials into Everett's show. As she listens, the sound becomes very distorted and she gets an interesting phone call. I'm not even sure aliens would be my first guess with a sound like that one. Maybe Morse code or even some sort of man-made signal, but considering this is the 50s, I feel like everyone thought a weird sound on the airwaves was aliens. As Faye cuts into another operator to let her listen, she asks if she's ever heard the sound that came through on her end. The lady says no, but Faye ends up getting another call before too long. On the other end is a lady that is yelling about a strange object hovering over her land. As she cuts out, Faye goes back to the sound that was coming through on the other line. As Faye tries to reach law enforcement by any lines possible, she ends up getting a call from another operator. But when she goes to explain her situation, the line cuts out abruptly. No matter who she ends up calling, they all cut out mid-conversation. Finally, she calls Everett at the radio station. I'm sorry, if a weird sound comes through over the radio waves, the first person I would call is the one that works with the radio waves.
We get in trouble?
We haven't done anything.
Don't you love how everyone's first thought is always whether they'll get in trouble? They very clearly didn't do anything, but they're still worried about whether or not the government will think they had something to do with it. Have people always been paranoid of the authorities? Everett decides that it'll be a good idea to play the sound over the airwaves to see if anyone knows anything about the sound. As the sound plays on the radio, we go on a scenic journey through the town until we come to the gymnasium where the basketball game is playing. As everyone is seen having a good time, we cut back to the radio station building where Everett is out smoking and looking up to the sky. Eventually, a caller reaches out to Everett and he says that he knows what the sound is coming from. His name is Billy and he speaks about his time in the military. He speaks of a time that a research base had found a foreign ship one night, and when he left, he remembered that it played the same sound that Everett just played. He also ended up developing a lung condition afterwards. Well, that's just great. This guy gets sick right after hearing this sound, and Everett is over here playing it for the entire town to listen to. Everybody is gonna be down with the sickness pretty soon now.
It was coming from thousands of feet higher than anything could fly.
Considering this is the 50s, we should really think about the perspective this is in. We hadn't got into space like we can now, so really he's talking about how high airplanes can fly. So this would technically be from anywhere in outer space according to what he's saying. At this point, the only thing they had really done in space had been Sputnik, and that was unmanned. Billy goes into a little more detail about how the sounds seem to communicate with each other, but he gets disconnected in the middle of his sentence. Everett and Faye frantically try to figure out a way to get back in touch with Billy, but Faye says he called long distance, so she has no way of finding out where he's from or who he really is. Just when they thought they wouldn't be in touch with Billy again…
Number, please.
Yes, this is Billy.
I'll connect you. Where he is, Everett?
You would think this is the most exciting event in the history of this small town, and knowing how small towns work, it probably is. Faye works as an overnight operator, so I'd say the few calls she gets to patch through are either juicy little gossip-worthy moments or wrong numbers. This is exciting. When Everett says he needs Billy's real number, Billy says he can't do that, and he goes into detail about how he's a black caller. It turns out that all of the soldiers that were on this detail with him were either black or Mexican, and he believes that was so no one would believe what they say if any of them ended up talking about what they had experienced. Billy does explain that there was one man that they used to work with that ended up recording the sounds anytime they popped up, and when he heard the recordings, he realized that they were the exact same sounds that he had heard in that first night he worked the detail. Faye recognizes the name and tells him that he died, but the man's tapes had been donated to the library.
Okay, Faye, run.
It's the middle of the night, the library is closed, and the entire town is at the high school for the big game. Sounds like a good time to break into the library to listen to some old alien ship recordings. And now all of those late night callers aren't gonna get patched through to where they need to get to. Faye runs home to get her bike and the key to the library. Why this random girl has a key to the library, I'll never know.
Did you steal a
Get him?
car?
No. Yes, come on.
That answer was not reassuring. I'm not sure what the yes was answering and what the no was answering. Why did he steal a car? To aid and abet her library break-in? Is this the worst crime that happens in this town? They probably feel like Bonnie and Clyde of small town USA. Oh, now I know where she got the keys. She stole the keys and that bike from the librarian's house. All this because of some weird sound that came through over the radio. After they get back to the radio station, Faye tries to talk to Billy, but the line cuts out again. Instead, Everett and Faye stay at the radio station to try and find the tape that has the recording of the alien sound. As they go through almost all of the tapes, they finally come to the one that has the same exact sound as what they heard earlier that night. Fine choice of words, and I plan on using that on a regular basis now. As Everett plays the sound over the airwaves, the whole station experiences a blackout, and the two of them rush outside. As Everett starts recording his news, Faye realizes that she should be at the switchboard in case someone calls about everything. As they drive to the operator building, Everett explains what he thinks is going on.
Nothing's happening except we're being spied on or we're about to be invaded.
By who?
Soviets.
I feel like anytime anything went wrong back then, everyone in America immediately thought it was the Soviets that were trying to ruin their day. Literally everything got traced back to them. Your favorite restaurant is out of hot dogs after a busy Friday night. The Soviets stole all of the farm animals overnight and shut down the factories. Once they get to the switchboard, Faye has calls lined up about people seeing something in the sky. As they run outside to try and spot it for themselves, they come across Bertsy and Gerald, who actually followed whatever it is from the canyon down the road. While they try to discuss what they've experienced, Faye gets another call on the switchboard, but when she asks who they want to speak to, she finds out that she's trying to get a hold of Everett.
Hello, this is Everett the Maverick Sloan, WOTW.
I can tell you what's going on.
Well, hello, Miss Ominous Midnight Caller. What can I do for you? She tells him her name is Mabel Blanche and that she'll tell him more so long as he comes to her house to record her story. Everett and Faye hop into the stolen car and rush over to Mabel's house. As they enter Mabel's house, all of the lights are off, but Mabel calls out saying that she's in the back of the house. As they get to her room, Mabel is whispering something that isn't a foreign tongue, but when she sees them, she stops. She explains that she has even more to build off of Billy's story and it goes back farther than his does. She hopes that what they talk about that night will be newsworthy on the radio, and she's been waiting for years to talk about everything.
The people in the sky, they've liked this place.
If that doesn't sound like a hippie rock album title from the 70s, then I don't know what does. The more this story develops, the more intrigued I am, and I want to know exactly how far back this story goes. Old Lady Mabel here has a secret story too, you can already tell. Mabel tells him of the Bull's Acre Raid, which is about a train that was found completely empty. People assumed the Apaches had taken everyone, but later, a woman appeared and began muttering in some language until she stole a horse and ran. Later on, Mabel fell in love and had a baby, but when the the baby was 10 months old, she heard the baby mutter the same words that mysterious woman had spoken years before. After her son turned 9, she felt like something was outside again, and her son walked out one night and disappeared. When she followed his footsteps outside, they stopped abruptly without a trace of anywhere else to go but up. Mabel believes that her son was taken up by the people in the sky. She believes the people in the sky are up there right now, and they're looking for people alone to mess with their minds. After all these years, she believes that they're the ones pulling the strings on everything and everyone. That would be a convenient way to explain how some mysterious things happen. When smart people go mad, saying aliens did it would make it so simple to explain the unexplainable. Disappearances could be treated the same way, but it all just comes across as ramblings of a madman. Considering Mabel requests that they take her to the ship so she can see her son, it kind of plays into the rambling part of things. Just before they leave, Mabel hands Everett a paper with the words she was mumbling when they got there. When they get to the car, Faye realizes that she forgot all about her sister back at the house. As she grabs her sister and heads over to her friend's house, she grabs her friend's camera.
Boy, stop smiling.
After watching all of this seriousness play out like a soap opera, it's nice to have a moment with a character that is oblivious to everything going on. She's literally just standing there cheesing over the idea of her best friend being with Everett, and it's awesome. As Faye and Everett head back to the car with the baby, Faye warns her friend to stay inside tonight because there is something in the sky. She really expects her friend to just go back to bed after telling her something like that. That's like a worst nightmare for anyone with even the slightest bit of anxiety. There might be something wrong, but don't you worry about it. Just go back to sleep. When they make it back to the switchboard, Faye hears from the babysitter, and she finds out that she saw something round in the sky behind the clouds. Faye and Everett get into the car with a couple that came from the canyon, and they head for where the thing in the sky was last seen. As they're driving, Everett plays back the tape that has a recording of Mabel mumbling the words in another language, and Gerald and Bertsy end up going into a trance. While in that trance, Gerald ends up veering into oncoming traffic for a minute, but Everett turns off the recording just in time to keep them from running into a truck head-on. After they pull over, Faye and Everett get out of the car and run into the woods. Once Everett shines his light around the woods, he sees that the trees and grass are actually burned. The two of them walk around and look at what looks to be a direct path through the trees into the sky.
They're really here.
That's his reaction to realizing that aliens are actually real and present. What would your reaction be if you just found out aliens had been right above you for years, mind-controlling people and visiting when they want to? Everett runs out into the middle of an open field. As he starts to walk towards a humming sound, the sound of the baby crying pulls him back, but it's now that he sees a UFO lighting up. Seriously, I feel like anyone would be 1,000 more times reacted to the idea of aliens than these two have been. This is the most nonchalant attitude I've ever seen taken with first contact with aliens. A shadow comes over them and they look up to see a giant UFO flying overhead. These UFO sightings are some of the most majestic versions I've seen in a film since E.T. There's no threat, no imminent danger, or anything like that. They're just there. After that, the basketball game is over and everyone pours out of the gym. They find the stolen car in front of the operator building. The radio station and operator room are completely empty, and power is restored. Meanwhile, a set of footprints is seen leading up to Everett's recorder in the field where they had been standing. And just like that, the film is over. For a film built off of the first contact with aliens in the 50s, it did a great job of ramping up tension throughout. I actually ended up being more engaged as the story went on rather than getting bored with the story progression, and that was a nice change of pace. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to help get us over that 100,000 mark before the end of the year. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.